I don't particularly like to box my people. I tend to just love friends and love connections. And it is a thing actually with new people I sometimes have to have a conversation about, is that, my baseline of how much I welcome a friend into my life and how much of a connection is just still within the bucket friend can sometimes be a little bit difficult to navigate, because there are other people for whom they're like, hey, the way you're behaving towards me, like the level of physical intimacy, the, sharing details about your friends and your life and your work, this feels like the kind of thing you would share with a primary partner. And I feel like you're doing primary partner things with me, and now I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be that for you.
Welcome to Normalizing Non-monogamy, the podcast where we interview incredible people from across the entire spectrum of non-monogamy to hear their fascinating stories. We strive to bring guests on the show who have a healthy approach to non-monogamy. However, it's important to remember that everyone does it a little bit differently, and the views and opinions expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect our own.
Additionally, we produce this show for entertainment purposes only. Please be aware that we aren't doctors or therapists. Consult a medical professional for anything regarding your health that you might learn about on the show. Enjoy!
Welcome to episode 285. We're Finn and Emma, and today we have a beautiful conversation with Elizabeth. Non-monogamy has been part of Elizabeth's life and the way she's been relating with two people for a long time. And we just have a wonderful conversation about her journey.
Yeah, I think the takeaway that I had from this conversation is that Elizabeth sort of just tries to be herself and live her life in a way that is kind to everybody involved, and that life is really just sort of a series of experiences and almost experiments that we learn from.
Yeah.
And it's a really beautiful way, to me, it's a really beautiful way of living and relating to people. And I love it. And I love this conversation.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, I think there's a couple other things that I just wanted to touch on that we kind of cover in this conversation with Elizabeth. We have some great conversations on how just the vast variety of ways that people do non-monogamy, because I think she sort of weaves in and out of a lot of different flavors of it.
Yeah.
And I think we also have some really incredible conversations. Actually, we have the definitive answer, finally, Emma.
Of what?
A sex friend versus a partner. A friend with a benefit versus a partner.
A definitive answer?
A definitive answer.
Wow.
Maybe I'm being facetious. Maybe there's a joke in there that we have. Because this is a super fun conversation.
It is. Yes. You're going to have to listen to find out.
You have to. And there are some really hilarious stories at the end where Elizabeth talks about living at Hito.
Yeah.
And her blooper is amazing.
Priceless.
Priceless. So you're going to want to stick around. This is a wonderful conversation. Elizabeth is also the founder of an app called Amorus.
Yes.
Amorus is an amazing intimacy app for couples or for partners. It doesn't have to be couples, but for partners, it's not a way to meet new people. It's a way to take your existing relationship, make it spicier, make it deeper, make it funner.
It's full of games.
It's full of games and full of fun.
Yeah.
And Elizabeth talking about the app is not just your average sales pitch. It's an amazing conversation.
Yeah.
This whole thing is amazing. We're going to stop talking about it so we can get into it. For anybody who is a premium subscriber, we're going to jump right into the interview. But remember, you can go find out links to everything that Elizabeth does on our show notes at normalizingnonmonogamy.com or in your podcast player below. All right, premium subscribers, here we go. Everybody else,
a few announcements. First up, if you're not familiar with the premium subscription, it's a way to skip the announcements here up front and jump right into the interview. But don't worry, you still get important dates in the outro. To sign up for as little as a couple bucks a year, go to our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com, and scroll down on the homepage. You'll find links there.
The other thing you can do after you've scrolled down and become a premium subscriber is scroll back up and click on the events tab, and you can sign up for our next virtual meet and greet, which is this coming weekend, April 29th. Saturday night. It's going to be an off-the-chain party of us asking fun questions, going into breakout rooms, meeting new people, and making friends from all over the world.
Yep.
We would love for you to join us. To sign up again, go to the events tab on our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com. You'll sign up, and we'll have a great party this weekend.
While you're there on the events tab, you can scroll over and click on the community tab.
Scroll over, move over, mouse over.
I guess
tap over.
I guess it's technically not scrolling.
Most people don't use mice anymore. They just tap.
Anyway, there's also a community tab on our website. We're giving you a 101 guide to our website today. Anyway, on the community tab, you can find out all of the information about joining our online community. It's incredible. These people are amazing. We have over 200 members, and for as little as $5 a month, you get access to an ongoing chat platform, plus virtual Q&As, monthly Q&As, plus men's groups and women's groups, and so much more. Thank you, everyone out there who is a community member. We value you so much and we love you. Just thank you. I can't say thank you enough.
And if you don't think we do a good job of describing the amazingness that is the community,
yes,
you could go over to our website and click on the Contact Us tab, and you could send us a voicemail.
Send us some feedback.
Send us a voicemail about how amazing the impact of our community has been on you. And then we'll play that here, and we don't have to talk about it anymore.
Yeah.
And then we can talk about things like I was sitting here as you were talking, thinking about the old rollerball mice.
Oh my gosh.
And then I'll talk about those in the outro. So that's a reason for people to stick around. That's called a teaser.
A teaser.
But what we are going to talk about before that is stdcheck.com.
Our favorite way to get tested for STIs. It's the service that Finn and I use. We've used it for years. It is quick and simple and
cheap.
Yes. For as little as $129. If you use the links on our website, you get $10 off. You get a 10-panel test, and it's just super simple.
We'll just leave it there. Links are in the podcast player show notes or on our resources page.
And using those links does support the show. Thank you in advance.
And it saves you the $10.
Yes.
All right. With that, we're going to go talk to Elizabeth, and we will see you all on the other side for our outro and that amazing, riveting story about rollerball mice.
Stay tuned. Let's go talk to Elizabeth.
Welcome to the podcast, Elizabeth. We are excited to talk to you. We're excited to learn more about you and your work and your story and everything. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk today.
Yeah, this should be a fun one. We know a little bit about you, so we guarantee at least a medium to large size amount of fun for everybody today. Is that an appropriate amount?
That feels totally appropriate, and okay. I'm flattered to know that that's the pre-existing opinion. Thank you.
All right, well, we'll check back in at the end and see if we nailed it. So, do you mind introducing yourself for us and for the listeners out there?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Dell. I am the founder of an app called Amorus, which is a romance and intimacy app for couples, and also someone who has gone in and out of non-monogamy a lot in my life. So
yeah, I love it. And I'm going to put a teaser here so people stick around till later when we talk about
the app.
The app and living at hedonism for multiple months, because that's a thing you've done, and we're going to talk about it later, but not right now. Right now, we get to go back in time and understand how and why and when and where non-monogamy came into your life.
Okay. So I would say that the term non-monogamy came into my life relatively recently, but the activity came into my life probably a lot earlier. And I would say for me, maybe the first piece of that was just coming to understand that, and then this was in college, was realizing that I was one of the few people I knew for whom, or especially one of the few females I knew, women I knew, for whom sexuality and emotional connection were not the same thing. That they were not two pieces that had to come together and they were sort of obliged to be connected. You know, if you hooked up with someone, you didn't have to be dating them and didn't have to think of them as your boyfriend. If someone was your boyfriend, you didn't have to be exclusive to them. And that was just, I think, a concept that I wasn't practicing in terms of I am ethically non-monogamous and I'm juggling partners in any real complicated way. It was more just, oh, no, we had fun last weekend. Well, I don't think we're dating. We haven't talked about if we're dating. We're not dating until we've talked about that we're dating. And realizing that that was just a surprising sentence to say to many of my girlfriends, and that was a concept for them that was unusual. And, you rewrite your story in retrospect, right? You look back with 2020 vision and hindsight. But I think that was a very early start for me in the idea of non-monogamy. And then just, I have been single. And lived most of my adult life in Los Angeles. I've been single in Los Angeles for a lot of years and just not committing to someone. And that is non-monogamy. And that's just being open and kind and straightforward about, hey, until we have a conversation about being exclusive, I am assuming that we are not. And it is remarkable how surprising that conversation has been to people so many times. And what's really interesting too is when you ask the follow-on question, well, were you planning to be exclusive to me before I had this conversation? And they were like, well, no. And I'll be like, so why is it sort of difficult or strange or off-putting or like getting your hackles up that I'm telling you explicitly that we're not exclusive? But it's funny that way.
The standard MO is just to do it and not talk about it because that's a bit uncomfortable, right? Why do we have to call it out? And have you had the conversation too? We are dating and we want to be exclusive, or we are dating and we don't, like, have you had that sort of, I don't want to say what you're doing isn't non-monogamy, because I think it is. I think having that conversation and being open and ethical about it is sort of the core pillar. Mm-hmm. But have you also had the other conversation of, hey, let's call us an item. And I don't know why I just turned into somebody from the 1950s, but we're an item now. And yet we want to continue to not be exclusive.
So in my experience, not really. The partners that I've had where we really had an exclusivity, like we wanted to be our important somebodies to each other, were in the context of we're going to at least be monogamous for a while. And if there was a later stage day when that monogamy might have switched to non-monogamy, the point in which the relationship ended came before the point in which the relationship opened.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah.
So, I had a very explicit conversation about monogamy with my last long-term partner, but that was early in the pandemic. And so the conversation was, hey, I am not necessarily a long-term monogamous person. We're in the middle of an apocalypse. I'm not looking for any other partners at the moment because of the world outside, but let's just know that in the grand scheme of where we will go in the future, that needs to be on the table.
Yeah. Like just because there was a pandemic doesn't mean that you're going to just stay monogamous. Like you're functionally monogamous at the moment, but that you're not necessarily going to stay there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it was an interesting time to start seeing someone because, he was a lovely gentleman, but, he stayed in every night of the week and watched reality television because it was Tuesday. I stayed in every night of the week and watched reality television because there was an apocalypse on. And then afterwards it was sort of, oh, right. That was pandemic behavior. That wasn't real life. I put that in quotes.
Yeah. You were sort of situationally aligned in your...
Exactly.
Yeah. That's very interesting. Yeah. And I would love to maybe go back a little bit and to sort of your realization that maybe sex and physical intimacy don't necessarily have to be equated with romance and partnership and a longer term connection, and just sort of what I think I asked this because I imagine there's a lot of people out there going, hey, that sounds kind of like me, and I didn't know that was a thing, or I'm feeling really weird about that because all the people around me aren't doing it that way, and I'm
then maybe you don't have the language for it.
Yeah, and I'm curious what that time really looked like for you. It sounded like that was coming out of high school and into college a little bit, that you were sort of exploring that, and maybe just like what that functionally looked like on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis for you.
Well, mostly what it looked like on a functional basis was I was the girlfriend who hooked up a lot. But I think that for me, I was in a place where I was interested, especially in college, I was interested in exploring sexuality and intimacy. And I was exploring it experientially, right? Like for my sort of lens to it was, well, this is a really fun thing I get to do with a new partner, with a new person. Let me try it out. And like, oh, this is what a penis looks like. Oh my goodness. And that, and in some ways, in my head, that was categorically like going to try a swim lesson or going to try a guitar lesson.
Yeah.
Right? You're out in the world exploring cool things, and the cool things that you explore, you're not bound to do them for the rest of your life just because you thought they were a cool thing, right? This was a time in which you're just having all of these experiences, and I might go with a bunch of friends to go see Rock Horror Picture Show and like dance and wear costumes. And having done it, that does not mean that now I have to be one of the people who's going to go every single week to the show and see it every time. It could have been a one-off experience, and that was really fun, and that was really cool, and that didn't harm anyone and enriched our lives. Mm-hmm. And I just had the same perspective around my exploration of other people and their bodies and intimacy and flirting. And, a huge part of this also was just exploring flirting, exploring like how if I just stare at you really intently across a room for 5 minutes, is that enough? Okay, check, it is. All right, cool. Let me see what else. Like, what if I just stand near you and like bang into you a bunch of times, but like never make eye contact? What happens when that happens? You're a little puppy kind of exploring all the different ways you can make human connection.
And I think that's amazing. The perspective is amazing, and the experience, but it sounds like in some ways maybe you were an anomaly with your friends in that.
I think I was a bit of one. I think that it in many ways really didn't occur to me that having had this fun experience, I should now assume that I'm dating this person, or I should expect them to come sit with me at the lunch table or at the dinner in the dining room, or that I should, walk over to their dorm and then walk with them to class or something. And I honestly don't know if there were gentlemen that I wildly disappointed because I did none of those things, and they were sort of hoping that this was going to be a thing, and they weren't. I've always been a pretty explicit person. Like, if you want to hang out, say explicitly you want to hang out. And then I'm down. I'm interested. But I don't go around imputing people's sentences most of the time. And so I think it was interesting for my friend group. And I think, it led to a lot of interesting conversations where I would say, well, wait, why do you think that should I have done that? Do all the rest of you? Like, no, it didn't occur to me that just because I did that last night, that today I have to do all of these other things related to this person. I had plans to go do an inline skate ride on the bike path. And then we were all going to go to the movie tonight. Like, why would I talk to that gentleman? I mean, he seemed very nice, and I think that was, here's the thing. What I can say is that for all of my college girlfriends, many of them I still have, I am still the person that you call when you want a totally non-judgmental take on whatever happened. So I have certainly had many phone calls in my life of, okay, so there was a Christmas party and I'm supposed to be with someone, and it was office and we were drunk and there was a kiss. And I'm the person who will say, oh, well, was it a good kiss? Like, wait, that's the question you're asking? I was like, hey, let's just start from there. Because if it wasn't like not a big deal, then like it was a shitty kiss. These things happen. It isn't, the emotional import of this going forward is pretty negligible then, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
like,
it's not going anywhere. Yeah.
But if it was a really good kiss, like let's break down why it was a good kiss. Let's think about what's going on. But it just the person who's not going to say, "Oh my God, you're breaking the rules."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting there is, in some ways, that's almost a pass on infidelity, and at the same time, I think there's the thought that came to me was sort of a Dan Savage quote that he often says, which is like, let's say you are married for 75 years and you kissed somebody sometime in that time and the rest of your relationship was pretty amazing. Or even if you kissed somebody 5 times, like you still did monogamy pretty damn well. And, so I think there is something valuable to the question of, well, was it a good kiss? Because then it was like, well, no, it was a shitty kiss and I feel horrible and I don't ever want to do it again. It's like, well, wow, look at what you learned about that through that experience. And then, do you go and tell your partner, or do you say, well, this isn't something I ever want to talk about again and it's never going to happen again? So I think I've learned enough there is sort of a pass on it here of like, you screwed up. You're never going to do it again. Maybe you don't need to talk about it. Or maybe you're the type of person who's like, no, I still need to talk about it. I need to come clean about it. But it wasn't just a quick jump to vilifying them for making some heinous mistake that they should wear around on their, the front of their shirt for the rest of their life.
I mean, look, there's lots of things that come on the borderline of like, oh, I should tell my partner about this, or maybe and like, it can be a kiss at a party. We're a lot more cool with stuff that's not sex, but like, hey, did you just spend $1,000 on that like hobby of yours and not really tell them that you should, and we let, and just contextualizing in that and saying, hey, there's lots of these things. Like, okay, so maybe you broke that really, really important thing in the house that was really expensive. And that was, and if it's like really important to your partner, you're going to have to come clean about it. Or maybe you're just going to replace the goldfish and not tell your kids that it died. And like, when do you tell people and when do you not? But let's think of this in the spectrum of the fact that this is a scenario of, I did a kind of shitty thing and I have to figure out how to tell my partner about it or not tell my partner about it or figure out where in that spectrum it lives. That's a thing we do all the time. And the fact that this is related to bodies and not to money or not to possessions or not to something else is just a different context, but it's not a wholly different thing that is, outside and like, exactly like you said, vilifying the other person. I think it's just this idea of how do we start from human? And that is a thing that I really like to do.
Yeah. I think that's a great kind of way to sum it up. And I think too, just to maybe cover our asses a little bit. It's nobody here is saying, please go out and just romp around in any way you want carelessly. You don't have to tell anybody. Just do yourself and don't worry about the rest of the world and how they're going to react. It's not that conversation. It's, you made a mistake one time or whatever. What do you do with that? If you kiss somebody, you flirted with somebody, do you immediately have to run home and throw yourself on a cross?
Well, and I think for me, actually, it's much more also about, it's not about, the question isn't who do you talk to? The question is, how do you understand the experience you had before you go have the conversation with your partner, right? Yeah. Is how do you have a space in which to say, what happened? Why did it happen? Was I really drunk? And why was I really drunk? Like, what was going on with me that I wanted to put myself in that position, or that I made those choices, or, because a lot of times we just go to the sort of, here's the bad thing that happened, and don't unpack, where did that come from?
The why behind it.
What's the why behind it? And what's the larger conversation? Because most of the time this is my personal experience, when I do rule breaking stuff, especially sort of the bigger stuff, especially the stuff that afterwards I'm not that proud of, it's usually because I'm trying to get attention on something much more underlying, right? I'm trying to like break free of something that I'm struggling with, or I'm trying to wake myself up to something. And so how do we start from there versus just start from, oh, that's bad, you're a bad person?
Yeah. I think that's a much better way to say it than I said it. Because I think, the underlying piece is, just because you made a mistake, you're not just some horrible, unethical slut that's just what you want to do. You just want to hurt people. Like you said, there's something else probably to talk about. and then figuring out how you want to talk about that before you talk about it. And maybe the answer is, I sat and thought on this for a long time, and I don't ever really need to talk about it because I can stuff it away and never have it come up again because I had this experience and I know enough about myself to say this experience will never happen again. And what's the value? Am I going to destroy somebody by having this? And is it actually a more compassionate, empathetic thing to do to keep it to myself because I have an understanding of who I am versus that kiss made me realize I was polyamorous and I'm probably going to want to do this every Christmas party and probably every other party in between. Maybe we need to have that conversation.
Or maybe we just need to have the conversation that I just really want to be flirted with.
Mm-hmm.
And I was willing to have this kiss. This kiss was sort of like the inevitable end stage of just getting flirted with. And I miss that. And hey, can we figure out how to do some flirting together? Like, how can we, this is a thing that I'm missing and I didn't want it from someone else. I just wanted it and somebody else was the person offering.
Mm-hmm.
And how can we contextualize this as not, I'm cheating on you, but hey, I really miss us seducing each other. I miss us flirting with each other. I miss play and tantalizing. And how do we find that again?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very different conversation with a partner than, oh, I kissed somebody else and now you're going to be full of self-doubt about why and how and what went on.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The other thing that came up, it was really interesting. As you were telling that story about kissing at the Christmas party, Finn went right to the infidelity part. My brain went and I didn't interrupt it back then because I wanted to hear the rest of the conversation, but my brain went to, oh no, I kissed somebody at work. What am I going to do in that situation? Like, how do I handle that with a coworker? And I don't know why my brain went that, but that's a different situation of like, maybe that's okay, but maybe I kiss my boss. What do I do then?
Maybe that's a function of the fact that it wouldn't be an issue if you kiss somebody at a work party.
Depends.
Well, I'm saying in our relationship, that's not the issue. The issue is more,
Yeah.
And I think it's all about like the relationship that you have. And I would say for a number of my girlfriends who, that everybody evolves in how their relationships live and breathe. But for many of them who at the time were not in relationships where they had really thoughtful, challenging conversations about the relationship they wanted to be in. Mm-hmm. A big part of it was also just having a person who would ask those questions and who would say, hey, have you ever talked about what would happen in this context? Like, would you, and often asking the question, would you be interested in this? Because I feel like our society tends to message that it's sort of more okay for guys, like guys will just cheat and women are supposed to be angry about it. And that like women are supposed to be monogamous and men are supposed to be like railing against the strictures of monogamy, but still holding firm. And that's, it's a weird set of stereotypes, but it also leads you to sort of unquestionably accept monogamy. And I'm often the friend who's like, well, do you want that? Like, would you want the ability to go kiss somebody else? Would you actually be mad, besides what society tells you to be mad about? Would you actually be mad if your partner like was on a work conference or was on a retreat with like the 2,000 other people from the company and kissed a stranger who lives on the other side of the country and, comes back and is like, that's never going to be a thing anymore. It just was like but I got my flirt on a little. Are you actually going to be mad about that? Or are you mad because you're supposed to be mad about that?
Yeah.
And just have that conversation with yourself, maybe for a year. Maybe noodle on that when you're bored for a long time, but just challenge your set of assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think you can it's not quite the same clearly, but you can really, thinking about stuff like that, you can really kind of drop into that space, right? And this is a sort of a practice that I guess I've never really talked about, but that I do on occasion every couple of weeks, is really thinking through what would happen if I got a phone call that somebody close to me was in a car accident or got diagnosed with something or some terminal like thinking about that. And it can really shift how you move through your day for a few days. And so I think really thinking about that, like, okay, partner's out of town. what if they are hooking up with somebody right now? How do I actually feel about that? What comes up for me? Really kind of, actually intentionally thinking about it, I think is a valuable exercise to do.
I heard a story from someone about how, in one of the groups that I'm part of, about how they had a previous relationship where they had a kind of don't ask, don't tell while traveling policy. But then they would about once a year get really hammered together and then share all of their like don't ask, don't tell stories that had happened in the last year with each other. And you were like, that was what we did. And it was actually kind of fun. Like, we wouldn't talk about what happened on a work trip until that like spontaneous every like year, 18 months or whatever, when we just got like plastered and sort of spilled the beans. But we both did it. And that was fun for us. And I'm like, I don't know where in the worlds of like, I guess I relate the story only to say that the flavors of non-monogamy and the flavors of how we integrate intimacy and sexuality can be so multi-hued. And that's amazing.
Yeah. And I think that story, just like thinking through that, like how amazing and connective of an experience is that for those two people? They look forward to this event seemingly, right? All year. They get to get drunk and then connect over amazing stories about one another that they didn't know, right? And how many times do you hear people who get together and they're like, yeah, we talked about all the crazy stuff we did before we met each other. And then like you get to have that experience one time. And these people get to have it every fucking year. They're like, let me tell you about all the amazing experiences I had last year. And then you get to like unwind like, but wait a minute, we went to Disney World last year and we were hanging out all year and we had an amazing year together, but you also had these other experiences while we had an amazing year.
So when you came back from that conference and started making hints about ropes, I am rewriting the narrative. Okay.
But it has to be like, you have to, I think most humans are not necessarily wired to sit in that unknown. That can be hard. I think I'm somebody who is very curious and asks a ton of questions and in general. And so I can just imagine for myself.
Can confirm that.
I can imagine for myself, like that would be, I see the beauty in it and I see the excitement and I can totally understand how amazing that is. And yet I know during that year, there would be times that just would be torturous for me, very uncomfortable. And maybe that's not a bad thing. Like that's the thing. It's like maybe being uncomfortable in that is not necessarily a bad thing all the time, as long as it's like not severe, right? Like I don't want to be so like depressed and anxious that it's like destroying me. That's not good. But if it's slightly uncomfortable,
and if it's, I think the idea is everybody finds their own groove in that, and there may be people for whom they're like, no, I like this. I like the combination of this experience getting to be mine for a while. Like I get to keep it close to my heart and it's like my unique thing that everything isn't shared with my partner. But then eventually it gets to be this delicious shared thing with us. But then I think there's other people for whom, no, the way I'm feeling confident is that these experiences are shared from the beginning or that they're planned. I mean, I'm a big planner. And so there's something really, I loved this story, but I was also like, but then you don't get to anticipate, like you don't get to look forward to something because it just sort of happened outside your purview. It happened when you weren't noticing, and then you learn about it after the fact. So I also love the idea of when I'm with a partner, when we can plan something, whether that's going to a sexy party or that's something that they're going to go do with a different partner. Like I don't want to try and take over an experience that belongs to them and someone else, but at the same time being able to like be a little bit part of that. And, ooh, have you thought about this? And like, are you bringing those toys? And like, what are we going to dress up as when we go to this party? That's a huge part of the fun for me. So I would be really sad if I didn't have anticipation as part of the way I want to do this with a partner. So I think it's more just all of those different flavors and all of the wonderful, weird ways we find this to be powerful and exciting, and kind of giving everybody the space to say that spectrum can be really, really big as long as you're kind and caring and compassionate and loving to the people that you're partnered with.
Yeah. Yeah. And hearing you kind of talk about that, maybe kind of bringing it back to your story a bit. And again, there's no judgment here if this if I missed the mark here, but it sounds like your adulthood has not just been a series of one night stands that you've just been explicit with people like, well, I won't see you tomorrow or ever again, right? You've gone to parties, you've gone to events, you've developed connection with humans, but it's not.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I would say that I exercise ethical non-monogamy in everyone has all the different words for how this works. I have used the word single mostly to describe myself, single with partners that I enjoyed. I think nowadays someone might tell me that I was doing solo poly. I don't really understand. Like I'm fine with whatever moniker you put on it, but I have had a number of partners. I actually am really bad at letting partners out of my life. I tend to hang on to them. I really, really like sexy friends. And so I have a number of very long-term sexy friends, people who have been in my life for 3 years or 5 years or 10 years, or in one case, almost 20 years, they are not primary partners. They're not someone I'm necessarily talking to every day or messaging every week, but they are really good friends that sometimes dip into sexuality and sometimes doesn't. And so that's, and a lot of the adventures that I've gone on, a lot of play parties and experiments and groups and things like that have been with these long-term friend partners. Yeah. People that I really trust and have really a basis of play with.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. There's been that time that has developed, you have developed trust and comfort in that relationship.
You know, I remember an experience. This was one of my an early adventure partner. I sort of stumbled into a relationship with someone who was pretty adventurous, and they were like, "Hey, do you want to try this kind of things?" And I was like, oh, yes, I want to try them all. And he had suggested that we go to a sex club. I had never been to a sex club before. And so we went to a club in Los Angeles. It was sort of a floating club. It's called Joy. And we went for the evening, and I was, huge eyes. Like I was like, whoa, look at all of these things happening around me. This is amazing. And having a good time. And then after a while, I was overwhelmed, right? It's a lot of sensory overload, and you just get to the point where you're like, okay, that I'm processing all of that and my brain can't process anymore. And we were standing in a hallway, and I was like, I think I'm ready to go. And he was like, okay, great. I'm getting the coats. And there was no hesitation. There was like not 5 seconds of pause. It was just cool. I'm on it. I'm calling an Uber. We're on the door. Like we're outside the club. And I remember telling him afterwards, you have no idea how transformative that experience was for me. Walking out the door was so powerful. The fact that there was no pushback, there was no pause, but these girls are really cute, or like, are you sure you don't want to check out that other room? Or, but maybe we could get another drink. Instead, it was cool. We are on the street and we are getting in an Uber. And that we did a whole lot more adventures after that, all of which were enabled by that experience, all of which were that very visceral experience of when I said enough, there was not a like, well, are you sure? Is this okay? It was just cool. I respect that boundary. We're moving out.
I love that.
Yeah.
The idea that respecting somebody's no, and that a no actually leads to so much more in your life, right? When you can trust somebody's no, right? For him, right, too, trusting somebody's no, and you trusting that you can say no, is transformative for what you can then go forth and be willing to take risks on in life.
Exactly. And it was really visceral, right? It's really in your body. That is an experience that we had together. That is not someone saying, no, I really respect your boundaries. It's someone living it. It's the practice of it. And that was the really important thing to happen. And then from there, it was like, oh yeah, let's think about threesomes, or let's think about play parties, or let's think about all these other things, because I feel like you're a solid partner that I could go do that with. I trust that you're someone that I want to walk into that room with, and that if I want to walk right back out of that room, you're there with me, and that there's just so much more room for exploration now.
Yeah, I love that too, and I think there's another element of that I think you bring to the table, Elizabeth, which is the knowing on that person's behalf, that even if let's say they walk into a room and they're like, this is my room, these are my people, I never want to leave this room. And you're like, this room is the worst room I've ever seen in my life, I want to leave this room. That when you say, let's leave, and they leave with you, that they can come back to you and have a conversation at some point and say, I know I left that room with you, but that's my room, those are my people. So how can I explore that room and not make you feel like you have to explore that room as well?
Totally. And that's, and I think I love that. And it's one of the reasons I think I love having kind of friends that are sexy friends, because there's also gives everybody a lot of space to, I have a bit of compersion in me. I love hearing people's stories about their adventures, and they can go off and have adventures. And then I can be like, ooh, that does not sound like it's for me. But I am so excited that you did that. Congratulations. And I love hearing about it. But I'm glad I am not the person that you took into that room, because that's not my room.
But you learned experientially, probably somewhere along the way, that isn't your room, that you're not sitting on the sidelines going, oh, that room's disgusting. And they're like, well, have you ever been in there? Like, well, no, I can just assume it is. And it's like, well, I don't know. This isn't, Yeah. No, I am not an exhibitionist. It is something that I have very clearly learned about myself, that I don't enjoy people that I don't know watching me. And so I'm all for partners who want to go do fun, sexy things like that. I'm just like, cool, that's not me. I will stand in the back corner and I will watch that happen. But the idea of strangers' eyes on me who I have no relationship with, I have no trust, I have no expectation of experience with, it's just not my jam. Yeah.
Yeah. And you learn that about yourself.
That's where the adventures come from, is you get to learn all those things, and then you get to put it into play.
Yeah. How have you navigated throughout your life, I guess, conversations with family and friends about your relationships? Like, has that been something, because what you're doing is amazing and it works for you, but in our society, it's not
when are we going to get those grandkids?
It doesn't always follow the norms, right?
Yeah.
So, and I'm using air quotes as I say that, but I'm curious what your experience is with that.
Well, so it's interesting. I mean, I'm someone who's relatively straightforward, and I am pretty open. And so with a lot of my friends, I've just always been open about where I'm at, and whether, funny stories about dating in LA, or, who I'm seeing, or who else I'm seeing, or who else I'm seeing on top of who else I'm seeing. And with my family, I've mostly I was more discreet for a long time, not because they were not because of shame or anything. I think that that's something that I just did not grow up with. In fact, I grew up with a mother who was a professor of reproductive health. So kind of reproductive biology was something that I was the first kid on the playground who knew, not the last kid. I was always the, no, that's not how babies are made. Let me tell you how babies are made.
You're the one
And so,
educating your peers.
Exactly. Like, let me draw you a diagram, girlfriends in the bar, of like what your internals look like and how the 28-day cycle of your period works and what's happening. And like, this is what's going on. But it was more a kind of discretion. Like we're not a family that talks a lot about sex. It hasn't, other than the sort of biology of it, the kind of practice of it wasn't a family topic. Girlfriends and boyfriends and all of that. It was more, oh, here's a new person. Now let's talk about something interesting and intellectual with the new person who's like the partner who's come into the mix. That's all, it's just, that changed in the last couple of years because now I'm in the business of an app that's about sex. And so the sort of the skill sets that I have and the understanding and the knowledge and the broadness of how much I think about sex all the time has become very evident to everyone in my family. Which is sort of adorable because now I don't even need to be the one making the weird sex joke. Like all the rest of my family makes the weird sex joke and then looks to me and I'm like, oh, look what I've done to you guys. This is great. I love it. And so I think it's become more obvious the implication has become more visible of how I probably have been living my life for the last 20 years that culminated in an app that explores fantasies and, starts sexy conversations between partners. But I think my parents, my family, they're all super open with it. Now they're like, okay, now you're my urban dictionary. So there was a thing in the New York Times and they used this term. What does it mean, Elizabeth?
Yeah, you're the go-to for questions like that.
Right, exactly. I've now become that source for everybody in a much more open way.
Yeah.
So.
I hope they use the same strategy as they store them up all year and you just talk about them at Christmas dinner at the end of the year.
Exactly.
Let's get the whole list out there and that's what we're doing tonight.
Yeah.
What have we got to talk about? Right.
I'm so glad you've had that experience with your family that wasn't, I could understand being a little more hidden about it for a little while, but then it sounds like you've gotten to a point now where it's just like, it's just you. It's just, and
this is just me.
Yeah.
I mean, when I started Amorus, it was really funny. I thought that I was doing this crazy pivot. I was like, oh my gosh, I've been a film producer for all these years. And now I'm going to go do tech and intimacy and sexuality. This is crazy. This is such a wild diversion from my life. And I remember talking to some of my best girlfriends who've known me as long as they have and some of my siblings. And I was like, I think I'm going to do this thing. And isn't it wild? Isn't it insane? Isn't it a sharp left turn? And they were all like, no, it's not. This is pretty on brand for you, actually. You talk about this stuff a lot privately, like with friends, and you're our wild and crazy friend who lived at hedonism for 8 weeks, who has these adventures. Like, you're just now bringing that into the open, into your job. That kind of seems like all the threads coming together for the first time.
So they all checked you on your feeling of this is something brand new.
This is not as strange as you might think. I believe they call this founder market fit.
I love it. That's amazing. And I want to get into talking about the app a bit and definitely talking about Hedo a bit. But I had a question that I think it's maybe one that I just want to keep collecting data on, because it is the idea that you have sex friends or play friends, however you wanted to describe it. How do you personally delineate between this person is a sex friend versus this person is a quote unquote partner? People seem to draw a line somewhere there. And I'm curious how you draw yours, because I think for me, this line, if you gave people a graph, I don't know, one of those commercials that they used to do where they bring everybody together in a park in New York City and be like, tell us how much debt you think everybody has. And they put a sticky note on, pin the tail on the donkey. If you were to draw your line, everybody would draw their line differently of what a partner is. And I'm curious for you, how you define a sex friend versus a partner.
Yeah. And it's funny because when I think about it, I mean, for me, I think part of it is just cadence. Mm-hmm. How much time are you spending with this person? And what are the expectations of cadence? And I mean that in a good way, right? We have expectations of the most important people in our lives, the people that we share the most with, that and that's a good thing. We should have that. We should have an expectation that when I'm having a bad day, you're there. And when I'm having a good day, you're the person I celebrate it with. And when you're having a good day, you tell me and I get to celebrate it with you. And I think it's to what extent is there an expectation that this is a person that I'm going to with a lot of my life, or I'm going to with some of my life? And time creates so much intimacy, like just knowing someone for time. So it's a fuzzy line is what I'm saying, because when you have had a friend with benefits for a decade, they've seen so much of your life, even if they've only seen it from a once a month standpoint. They've seen who you are. And I am a person who I don't particularly like to box my people. I tend to just love friends and love connections. And it is a thing actually with new people I sometimes have to have a conversation about, is that, my baseline of how much I welcome a friend into my life and how much of a connection is just still within the bucket friend can sometimes be a little bit difficult to navigate, because there are other people for whom they're like, hey, the way you're behaving towards me, like the level of physical intimacy, the, sharing details about your friends and your life and your work, this feels like the kind of thing you would share with a primary partner. And I feel like you're doing primary partner things with me. And now I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be that for you. And that's a navigation. So I guess the big answer is I don't know. Mm-hmm. I think for me, the action is just trying to be really straightforward and trying to be really open and trying to be really, in many ways, explicit. Like I really want to talk through, hey, what does this feel like right now? Does this feel like casual? Like, are we seeing each other 3 times a week? But this is because we're in like the heart of new relationship energy, and it's just so much fun to fuck. And we just want to do that all the time. And, but we're not necessarily building to something where the rest of the time we should be seeing each other 3 times a week. Like once this energy goes back down again, then this will be once every couple of weeks. Or do we really want to be integrated? Do you want to meet my family? Do you want to come over for a dinner? And then every time I think I have a line, I realize that it's great, because I'm like, oh, well, but that person knew me when I was 20 and they met they've met my whole family. They just met them when like 2 decades ago. Or like this person I invited over for, an event at the family house, because we've been friends for 8 years. And I don't need to talk about the fact that, sometimes I'm also having sex with this friend who I invited to our family dinner party. And so, yeah, I guess the only way I know to sort of navigate this is to talk about it and say, this is where, like, for me, I just don't know how to not share my life with the people that I like in my life, with my friends in my life. And so let's figure out where your lines are and what feels comfortable and safe and supported to you. And if that means me pulling back, or if that means, let's figure out what that is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I love that. And I think one of the things that people who listen to the show frequently are no strangers to hearing, which is a label is really just the first word of a conversation. It's mm-hmm. the starting point of a conversation. And it sounds like for you, that is very true. It's, hey, you're a sex friend, you're a partner, you're mm-hmm. a whatever. Let me tell you what that means, because your definition of what quote unquote sex friend is mm-hmm. probably going to be very different than mine, or your just definition yeah. of friend is very yeah. different than mine. Like, I'm going to share these things. I'm going to talk about these things. I'm going to ask you these questions. And they're like, well, holy shit. Like, my wife doesn't even ask me those questions. Our mm-hmm. relationship is somehow more intimate, and we've known each other for 4 minutes. And so I think really understanding what is it that you're doing and how, and really the label is nothing more than the beginning of the conversation.
I mean, labels can be also really helpful.
Yeah.
You know, it can be really helpful to sort of frame. I love the label crush, because sometimes when you're like completely infatuated with someone, and I'll start to like get a little spiral in my head of, oh my God, is this a primary partner? Am I trying to? And then I'm like, no, I have a crush on them. Like, it's okay. Like, you know, I have a crush, and that's allowed to be like full of joy and sparks and fizz. And it also is a label that says, hey, but give it some time, and it may or may not want to be anything more than that.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's really helpful to label things, to let your own brain frame them, or to let your partner, your person, whoever you're with, sort of say, what's your label? And so how's that a great place to start for how you're framing our relationship? How do you think about our relationship?
Yeah.
Totally. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Should we talk about some Amorus app?
Well, can we ask about Hito first?
Yeah.
I think we should force people to wait until after.
You gotta get all the way to the end to learn about the Hito trip.
We would let's go with that. So we would love to hear more about motivation for Amorus and just all about it.
Yeah. Well, so I went into the pandemic with, so Amorus was a pandemic idea that has grown since. And when we all went into our lockdowns, I was kind of this single solo poly, had a few different partners and friends, none of whom were inside the lockdown circle, right? I share an apartment with my sister. I had an elderly neighbor that I was doing a lot of care for. I was buying groceries and stuff for. And so I was just, nope, no one else. I don't like that. That's my circle. Nobody else comes in the quarantine space. And so all of my intimacy was digital. It was through my phone. It was, it was solo experiences, and my partners were on the other side of some sort of technology. But what I found is what I really wanted was my partnered experiences. I mean, there's an awesome place for solo porn and all that, but I really wanted to connect and like intimacy and sexy time with my partner. But I wasn't the shiniest of me. We were in, like I said, this shared apocalypse. I was not the most creative and like the best sexter in the world at that moment. And even though I'm a storyteller and a sex educator, like I'm actually a really good sexter. I'm really good at this. But I was still like, I could use some tools. Let me go find ways to help play with my partner. And what I found was there was very, very little out there. I could find an infinite amount of stuff by myself. But if I said, I want to have an experience with this other person that I know, I'm not looking for a stranger. I'm not looking for something anonymous. I have my person. I just want to do less of the work. I just want to get to sexy fun faster and easier with them. There was very little out there. And what was out there tended to either live in the bucket of kind of cheesy, maybe a little misogynistic, like feeling kind of like these old truth or dare games that like didn't feel very sex positive, didn't feel very, empowering or fun, or, the kind of reflections of the kind of relationships I wanted. Or they tended to assume that you were a couple in struggle, right? This was, hey, you guys are having trouble with your deep and abiding relationship. How can we give you quizzes or help you understand your communication style? How can we fix this broken thing that you have? And I didn't want that either. And I was like, but where's the middle ground? Where's the I just want to look at my phone and giggle because my person sent me something sexy. And I realized there wasn't that. And that for me was the inspiration. I was like, I want to make that a thing for people when you have a person. Like the act of getting connected to the human that you actually want to be delicious with should not then stop you from having a way to look at your phone and get giggles about them, right? dating apps do this very well when you have romance with strangers, right? You get a Tinder notification and you're like, ooh, okay, I'm sexy. Like I'm on fire. And it might turn out to be nothing, but you get that. Mm-hmm. You do that. And then when we have a person that we're like, no, I've chosen you out of all of the people, I have chosen you, or maybe several of yous to give me shivers. Mm-hmm. Now it's all SMS text and it's all just like these common threads, and those can be fun too, but you have to do all the work and you have to hope your kids don't see it and you have to worry about, just all kinds of things. And so that's why I built Amorus. That was the inspiration for it. And what we created is a platform. It's a space for all of your sexiness with your partner. And that's photo sharing and messaging, but also a whole bunch of games and a whole bunch of privacy features underneath that that are specific for intimacy and sexuality, right? Consent features and response features, and some of them about encryption and safety. Some of them about, hey, we should be able to bookmark a text so you can go back to it, even if it was months ago, because it was a really spicy conversation. And you can't do that normally. And you're like, but I can't infinitely scroll backwards. Like there's a point at which you're like, I just can't backward scroll anymore. But remember when we had that, oh my God, that thing, and that was so hot. And can I just reread it? I'm like, yeah, just bookmark the text message. You'll skip right back to it months ago. And, just how do we think about what we want when we're sexy on our phone with our partner, and how do we build the thing that we want there? And also how do we help get there? So all of our games are about, can you play a matching swipe game to uncover shared fantasies? Can you play a question prompt game that'll ask you both fun and sexy, interesting questions? Can you send your partner a picture and they get it as a blurry puzzle that they have to solve before they get to see the picture you sent? So they just have to earn it. But how do we make it more fun to flirt with sex in a safe and fun and encouraging space? That's Amorus.
I love it. It sounds super fun.
Some of us are big game people. And so if you can combine my two favorite things, games and sexiness, you've won. You've won. So well done.
It's really fun. Yeah. We're only iOS, but if you are iPhone users, it's free in the App Store. And so, we definitely have people who go on and swipe fantasies every single day. And then they're like, well, your fantasies ran out. And I'm like, hey, there are 400 of them. You had to swipe every day for 3 months, 100 days of swiping. And they're like, yeah. So can you make more? Have you made more yet? Can you make more? Have you made more yet? And I'm like, yep. Every weekend I make more.
$10 a month. That's
working on it. I'm working on it.
Working on it. Yeah. Getting there. Totally getting there.
And for those of us who are Android users, will this be bestowed upon us at some point?
Yes. We are definitely working on having expanding out for Android users. We will be doing that sometime. I'm hoping this year. We just have to figure out the financing of it.
Yeah.
Is there a desktop version, or is that not right now?
No. Okay. And that's sort of an open question. Well, if you are someone who has a kind of very newest generation Mac, they built the Macs to allow for apps to be used on them. So it's sort of like that creates a desktop version for a very small slice of users, but we don't have an officially desktop version.
Okay. Yeah.
Excellent. So hopefully people can get that work on their work computer and sneak around all of the IT people trying to lock you down for being sexy on your work computer.
Right. Don't. I mean, maybe not on your work computer unless it's your own work computer. But we actually do things like we store everything in the cloud. We very deliberately do that. All of the information is cloud based and not phone based. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons for that is so that the primary reason for that is to have permission control so that we can very easily assert, if you revoke permission for something, say you've sent a picture and then a few months or weeks or days later, you're like, well, that's a little too spicy to have in the world. I'd actually rather not have that shared. You can delete that photo you sent and it will delete on both sides automatically. And having that cloud-based permission structure helps that a little. But also, one of the things that's been nice is that it makes us very portable. So if you happen to be using Amorus on a work phone and you delete Amorus, there is no record of that. Like the data is not on the phone.
Gotcha.
It just goes away, and then you can reinstall Amorus somewhere else, and it will all come back because all of the content isn't stored physically on the phone.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. And I just want to make a quick plug for us that if you came to work for our podcast, you could use the Amorus app on any of your devices. We can't pay you, but we can offer this benefit. We also can't give you a device. So if you bring your own device and you want to work for us for free, you are welcome to use Amorus on all of your devices while you're at work.
That's quite the deal.
We're a 100% perk based employer.
Very nice, very nice.
And our perks are very limited.
But they include sex, so that's a lot.
Exactly. So, all right. Well, I love it, and I'm excited. I know you and I had lunch a couple of weeks ago, and we got to play around with the app and talk through it all, and I love it. And so thank you, Elizabeth, for doing that work, for creating it, and I'm excited to see the new games that come out.
It's also really fun to just be able to see, fun things like on Fridays, I tend to post, what's the week's favorite fantasy swipe. And currently, find a unicorn. Like, that's the one the most people like in the last week. And followed by matching jewelry and sex while sleeping. Like, those are our current top swiped fantasies this week. And it's really fun to see how these things move around and who gets excited about what, and what is the most... what's the thing that the most people are saying yes to, and what's the thing that's matching the most times, and they're not always exactly the same thing. And yeah, it's really interesting. And I just look at it and I'm like, oh, you know what that is? That is people in the world being sexy. And I helped. And I love it so much. There's actually I as a founder, I wake up every morning and I check my statistics in my analytics app. And when you go on in the morning and you see this little message spike and you're like, 1,500 messages got sent on my app last night. Like, all these people were sending sexiness. It just makes me so happy.
That's amazing. How many users are on there right now?
So we have about 10,000 installed users.
Amazing.
Yep.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I mean, one of the things that I think is really cool about the app is really you could have 3 users and it would still be just as functional.
Yeah.
Because it's between 2 people. It's not, you're not out there swiping to try and find somebody. And so the functionality is the functionality. But I think it does say a lot that you have 10,000 people who are messaging you, maybe not all 10,000, saying, when are there more? When is there more questions?
What's happening next?
Yeah.
And I mean, I really that was a really important piece of it to me. There's a million ways that you can find a stranger and find a lot of stripes of strangers. And I love that. That's excellent. But I wanted a place to be with the person I wanted to choose in. And so, you send a URL link or you scan a QR code and you get a one-to-one connection with the person that you've invited in. And so nobody sees you unless you invite them into that play space, right? This isn't somewhere where something can come through and be like, oh, I see you're on Amorus. And you're like, that's just not a thing.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you for that. And links to find all of your work will be in the show notes. So
one more quick question.
Please.
You may have said this, I may have missed it. Do you pay for the app? Are there paid features?
So right now the app is free.
Okay.
So I would encourage everyone to download and join and play while it's free. We are going to be rolling out paid subscriptions in the next few months, probably within the next 6 months. And so then it will be a paid app. I mean, I believe really, really strongly that if you are not buying a product, then you are a product. And the thing that I do not want to do is sort of productize people's data, people's sexuality. This is yours. I want to provide a platform where you get to explore that in a really delicious way and feel really safe doing it. And part of that is you pay me for the platform, and I absolutely commit that I will never share, I will never read, I will never sell your information, that your data is yours.
Awesome.
And never really is that more important than what you're talking about, right? For most people, right? If ever you're going to pay for an app, and I think you're spot on, right? If you aren't paying, if you're not buying a product, you are the product. And that is well known. So I appreciate that. And I love it. I love the approach.
Yeah.
So now I would love to understand, was rent at Hedo just the most affordable way to live in Jamaica? Or how did you wind up being a resident of the hedonism resort for 2 months?
For 2 months. Yeah. Also, I want to put on that I don't think I was the only, when I was part of a group staying at Hedo for a while, but I heard rumors that there are some people who do this on the regular. Like there are people who come and stay at Hedo for weeks and weeks at a time.
Well, please email us. We would love to hear from them too. But yes, we've got you in front of us.
Got me. So my story was actually for work. Because, that's interesting. Yes, I stayed at Hedonism for 7 weeks, a week, and then a break, and then 7 more weeks. So I spent 8 weeks living at Hedonism for a movie. So prior to doing Amorus, I was a film producer, and I was hired to do what's called line producing, a movie called The Swing of Things. And that was a R-rated comedy that was shooting on the campus of Hedonism. So it was a movie about a wedding party that was going to the Caribbean for like a destination wedding. There was a storm, the plane gets diverted, they end up in Negril, Jamaica. They're like, oh my God, the wedding is destroyed. What do we do? And someone says, oh, I know a place. They do weddings. You should come there. And so they get in a van, they go up in the dark to this place, they wake up in the morning and oh my goodness, they're at Hedonism. And so it's like the bride and the groom and the siblings and the parents, and they're all in this crazy place called Hedonism figuring out what's going on. So, so that was a movie that was shooting all on the campus over the course of, so it was about 3.5 weeks of filming and about 3.5 weeks of prep that I was on, like living at Hedonism, making a movie and figuring out where we were going to film and bringing in a whole film crew. And it was quite an experience. We had to have a lot of conversations with every single film crew member who was coming. And I remember actually one of my assistant camera people being like, so this is kind of like a naked place. And I was like, well, some places on the campus are naked. Yes. And they were like, so do I need to be naked to do my job? And I was like, no, you do not have to be a naked cameraman. It's okay. You get to wear clothes.
And then the other cameraman pipes up, can I be a naked cameraman?
But I would prefer. Yeah.
I love it. That's amazing. And
that sounds like quite the experience. Yeah.
Yeah, it was quite the experience. The film's a fun one. You definitely get to see every piece of the Hedonism campus. But I think there were as many, if not more, shenanigans behind the scenes as there were made it onto the screen.
Yeah. That's a whole different podcast. That's for the premium extra paid subscription that doesn't really exist. I love it though. That's amazing. And I also think it probably reinforces your friend's reaction when you started the Amorus app that no, Elizabeth, probably not that far of a deviation from your life.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting place because a place like Hedonism has a lot of different flavors depending on the groups that are on campus, right? It really, like every week, the flavor of the resort shifts a bit because of the people who have come there. And so it was really interesting to be there over time and to see how different this one resort could feel if it was, a nudist group there that was much more interested in like dawn yoga on the beach versus a real party focused group that was like, no, we need blazing, DJs pounding music on every corner of the property all night long. I tell you, that one was probably the worst on the film basis, because you really like DJ stations all over make it very hard to record audio on a movie shoot. And so we were just like, stop, where is there quiet on the campus? Like we had to rearrange all of our filming for those 4 days to get as far off campus as we could.
Audio engineer's worst nightmare. He was just naked drinking margaritas. He's like, fuck it, I don't even care.
I mean, we did actually have to make a very hard and fast rule that we were like, you can't drink before the workday. You can't drink during the workday. You're not even at lunchtime. No cocktails. It's, I mean, an all-inclusive resort. It's, that was definitely present.
Reasonable rules. So I would love, in not in any way to tie it to your hedonism residency, but we love to ask the question about bloopers. And I think it sounds like you've had some life, and we would love to hear a blooper or two. They don't have to be sexual. They can be if you want, but just something to show us all that, and I think you've done this exquisitely well, that life isn't that serious, but we would love to hear your hilarious bloopers.
Okay. I have a really good one, and it's not from hedonism. I mean, honestly, the hedonism was a fantastically sexy environment in which I was absolutely not sexy, because I was shooting a movie and I was managing a crew of 60 people, and like it was just work, with naked people in the background,
and the foreground, but
and sometimes the foreground, yes. A few years ago, a friend and I thought it would be fun to try like a vinyl sheet. So we went to a sex shop and we were looking around, and there was like, oh, you do the vinyl sheet, like the slippery massage thing, like the super slippery, like big lube thing.
Gotcha.
Kind of our version of a neuro massage, I think. And I was like, that sounds cool. Let's try it. And he was like, no, I have this lube. It's like, make your own lube. And I was like, make your own lube. Okay, sure. Like I'll be game. Let's try it. Let's do it. And it was like a powder, and apparently you can kind of mix it to your own, the consistency you like best. He hadn't really ever done it before though.
Solid idea.
Yeah. So he starts mixing it up, and he's like, I think this is a good amount. Sure.
And you got the vinyl sheet, right?
So we got the vinyl sheet. And so there were many layers of bloopers happening on this evening. So we got the vinyl sheet on the bed, and we got towels around the bed so that we can like step on them if we're coated with stuff to get off of the bed and into the bathroom. And so first things first, vinyl sheets should go very low to the floor. I happen to have a pretty high bed, and we discovered very quickly you can go flying off one of these. If you're like moist, if you're all like wet and slippery, you can just like, it's like in space, a little bit of pressure in one direction has you shooting off in the other direction. And it's exactly like that. And when you're 4.5 feet off of the floor, that's actually terrifying. It's really, really potentially dangerous very quickly. So we should have been on the floor, but we were raised up, and we had this lube that was mixed up. And so we start like putting it on each other, and we're slipping and sliding, and it's really fun for a bit. We're trying to like only move a bit though, so we don't fly off the bed. And then it keeps thickening. And the lube keeps thickening. And because we had never tested this stuff, and it turns into basically glue paste.
Oh no.
Because there's so much powder in it. And we didn't notice for a bit until we're literally glued together. And we're trying to get off the bed, and it's like trying to pull our arms apart. And we're like, it was
How did
this is why you want to laugh with partners.
Yeah. How did you get that? Like, did it come off with soap and water? Like,
yeah, it did come off with soap and water. And so we basically sort of pulling apart and sort of bonded together, maneuvered ourselves off the bed. And then once we got off the bed and we were stable on the ground, we could just pull ourselves apart. It didn't like take any skin with it.
Yeah.
And then we just went into the shower and turned on an extremely hot shower and took a shower for 20 minutes and did like 3 full body soaps, and it all came off. And we were like, okay, so that was an adventure.
We'll do that again tomorrow. That was fun.
Maybe next time, not with the make your own lube part.
Yeah, like next time, let's try some oil that has like a consistency that remains the same over time. And also, let's put the vinyl sheet like on a mattress on the floor, or on a carpet on the floor. So there's no distance to fall.
It's amazing. It was just like slip and slide stacks.
It was basically a slip and slide, and like you shouldn't put a slip and slide 5 feet in the air,
right.
But then at one point you're glued to the slip and slide, so there's a whole the whole experience. You got a real. You got all of this. You got the whole full gamut. I love it. That's amazing.
That's an amazing blooper.
Honestly, it was pretty awesome. He's still a friend, and we still laugh about it. And if you can do that, you can do anything.
The true definition of a sex friend. I think we just came up with it. Yeah. That was perfect.
Yeah.
I love it.
There you go.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth, for coming on, for sharing everything you did, and for all of the work that you do to make
really fun.
Yeah, to make our lives sexier. So thank you.
I love it. I am all about getting people out in the world and finding their fantasies and just it's so much fun to talk about sex. I mean, you guys get to do it almost professionally. So there you go. It's amazing.
It is.
It's just so delicious.
And remember,
I want everyone to have that.
Right. And remember, you can come work for us for zero pay, and you can use the Amorus app
and
anytime.
I can use my app whenever I want.
Yep.
Exciting.
On your device.
On your device.
On my device.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It was wonderful to chat. And we're just really excited about all the work you're doing and can't wait for more to come.
Yeah, definitely.
And we're back.
Nailed it.
It's been a while. I felt we needed to do it together.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for the such fun conversation. Oh my gosh, I'm still laughing about the blooper. But thank you.
By the way, Emma, our vinyl sheets are in the mail.
Okay, good to know.
And I bought a 5-gallon pail of make your own lube.
Okay, good to know as well.
It's just a giant thing of powder.
Good to know.
I'm going to use it to wax the floors. Oh, that reminds me of another fun story. When I was growing up, we for some spell, my parents had like a person who would come and like clean the house once a month, I think, just like to wipes, right? And she used to use Pledge on our hardwood floors in the dining room. And my brother and I loved it because then we would go in there and we would like slide across it on pillows because it was just like an ice rink.
That's a random story,
right?
That I have never heard.
So if you want to make your floors good and slick, you use Pledge
on wood floors.
Yeah, or lube. I'm guessing lube also works.
I was gonna say, but
I don't know what it'll do to your hardwood floors.
I also don't know what Pledge does to your hardwood floors. I feel like that wouldn't be the best either.
I don't know. We sold the house many, many, many years ago, and it hasn't come up.
Anyway, thank you, Elizabeth, for everything. A reminder, go check out her app and the Amorus app. It's amazing and so much fun. And links to check it out are in the show notes.
Sorry, Elizabeth. I didn't mean to interrupt plugging your work with my story about hardwood floors.
Anyway, a couple of quick reminders, or actually only one quick reminder.
That the rollerball mouse story is coming up.
That is coming up. But also our virtual meet and greet is this Saturday, April 29th. You can sign up at our website by clicking on the events tab.
Nailed it.
Okay, now this rollerball mice story.
Well, for probably a whole lot of people, they're like, what the fuck is that? And they probably had to Google it.
Well, because they also may have skipped some of the announcements in the intro where you plugged this.
Well, that's their own fault. They just learned a valuable lesson not to do that. But, there's a whole lot of people out there now who have never had to use a rollerball mouse.
That's true.
But one of the things that I always loved about the rollerball mouse was, right, after a certain time, it like picks up all the gunk and shit from your mouse pad.
Yeah.
And it gets wrapped around the little wheels.
Yeah.
And so your mouse would stop working.
Yeah.
And it would be like really finicky. And in some ways that was really frustrating. But I also absolutely loved cleaning off the little wheels and pulling all the dirt and hair off and going from a dirty like rollerball mousy thing to a clean one. So like I hated that it stopped working, but I also had the satisfaction of cleaning it.
This is an interesting revelation that I did not know about you.
But it's a thing, right? And so there's a TikTok channel.
Oh boy! Oh no!
So there's this guy on TikTok, all TikTok. I know it's TikTok.
Okay. Anyway, TikTok.
So this guy on TikTok, all he does is he drives around and finds people's yards who are completely overgrown. And then he goes up and knocks on the door and offers to mow them and clean up their yard for free, because there are people who just love watching the transformation from like a dirty, unkept yard
to a clean, or
to like a well manicured
lawn. Yeah.
And I'm one of those people.
Noted.
So yeah, rollerball mouse, it touches on that same part of the brain for me.
I feel like this has been an underlying thread in our relationship, but you've never put these words to it before.
Yeah. I don't actually like to clean. I just like the transformation.
That's why I'm so confused right now.
Well, but for me, part of it is cleaning when something's not like really dirty isn't as satisfying to me.
I see.
But going like, oh, you can like wipe a rag through it and see like, that hasn't been cleaned in a year, versus, wow, look at how shiny it is. That contrast for me, that's what does it.
Got it. Noted. Learning something new.
So, whereas you could dust every day, that's not fun.
Okay.
But dusting when you have to scrape a layer of dust off,
that's disgusting.
you get to see the contrast.
I understand. Okay, I do understand this, but I do think that we approach these things slightly differently.
Are you sure? Are you sure that's a fair statement you want to stand by?
Anyway, thank you, listeners, for hanging in here with us. This has been a interesting outro.
Finn's Corner. Getting to know
Corner.
Finn.
Next week, I wanted to say before we go to next week, like, I appreciate the transformation. I also, like, I can see that satisfaction. And when that happens for me, I also, like, it's an awesome feeling. But I don't know if I seek it out in the same way, maybe.
Is that why I do more of the cleaning?
Jesus. You just said you don't like to clean.
I didn't say I didn't do it, though.
That's true.
There's a lot of things I don't like doing that I do.
Okay. We have gone down a rabbit hole, and
it's now therapy.
We're back.
Settle in, folks. Put your seatbelts back on.
Next week, we have an interview with Libby and Tom. So you might have remembered last week in episode 284, we talked to Libby, Kier, and Drew.
And we waved to Tom in the background.
And we waved to Tom in the background.
Well,
now,
this, Tom moved from the background to the foreground.
And we have an amazing...
Well, leave it.
We have an amazing conversation with Libby and Tom next week.
The good news is this deep into the episode, we can just leave those things.
We're just going to leave the throat clearing.
Yeah, why not? All
okay.
Right. Next week, we'll see Libby and Tom, and we'll see you, listener. We hope you have a great weekend. We'll see you Saturday at our virtual meet and greet.
Thanks for making it through all of this if you're still listening.
Yes. And bonus points to anybody who brings up rollerball mice at the meet and greet.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.